On Chris Deals With It, I talk about the frameworks and methods I use to clear personal, creative, and professional roadblocks. My goal is to help others bridge the gaps between where they're at now and what they want to achieve. If you're new to the show, I'm an engineer, writer, parent, game designer, leader, and reader who leverages that experience to develop creative solutions to problems. First, an AI statement that all elements of this episode are products of the author, Chris Kreuter, and made without the use of any AI tools. Welcome to episode 74 of Chris Deals With It. This is the introduction of a multi-part series about the creative process. We'll cover my thoughts on how this process applies to creating and publishing works, and how it applies to games, fiction writing, other creative endeavors, and our professional careers. Let's say I got into a time-traveling elevator. Inside is me from 20 years ago, and I've only got that short trip to say something meaningful. What would I tell them? And that's basically the TLDR for this whole series. A life spent being creative will have surprising, unexpected impacts on your life. These impacts will extend far beyond the typical definitions of success, though you might get that too. So this episode is intended to provide a quick introduction to the series. This whole series was adapted from a lecture I gave to a game design and world building class at Monmouth University in conjunction with my friends over at Shore Gamers in Red Bank, New Jersey. I believe that everyone has the ability to be creative. The key is finding the ways in which expressing our native curiosity and creativity brings us joy and fulfillment. The ways in which we're creative evolve and change over time. And as I told the class in that lecture, we're not the same people we were in high school, just like I'm not the same creative person I used to be. Alongside my professional career, I've been consistently creative, working in multiple creative spaces. I've hosted this podcast since 2022. I've written abstract comics, I've illustrated art, I've worked on many different graphic design projects over the years. I was also the co-founder of Masquerade Games, producing Epigo and Simpletons, as well as many prototypes and IP that haven't yet seen the light of day. I have attended and spoken at game, literary, and science fiction conventions, and I've published 2 novellas and 4 novels, and my 5th novel, The Boy and Bus 13, will release this May. This series will close out with a final episode on the day of release of the book, talking about my creative process in the context of that project. Over the next 5 episodes, I'll walk through how I define the stages of my creative process and provide thoughts on making creative work. So let's break down my creative process here. Step 1, which would be episode 75, is ideation. This is capturing and developing ideas, exploring their potential, interrogating their suitability, identifying their potential value to audiences. Step 2, which would be episode 76, will talk about scaffolding, fleshing out the ideas that stick, making preparations for a project, creating structures and preparing tools to aid in the production process, and understanding the context in which your creative work may be received both mentally and physically. Step 3, which will be in episode 77, will cover production, turning a project into a product, service, or experience, being clear on the form factors and cost structure of your creative work, evaluating your non-negotiables and how the work can evolve during its production. We'll talk a bit about the spaces in which we create things and give you some of my thoughts on the impact of AI on creativity. Step 4, episode 78, will cover editing, why and how we should refine our work, the critical service that editing performs for your audience, getting and receiving feedback, and the importance of testing groups. And finally, step 5, episode 79, is putting your work out there in the world, dealing with the logistics and emotions of releasing your work, the role of gatekeepers and their benefits and pitfalls versus the realities of self-publication. We'll talk about the tasks required post-release and handling the critique of others and ourselves, how the work we create levels up our skills for future work, the importance of acknowledging others that aid and inspire your creative journey. We'll talk about understanding the financial realities of your project, marketing and promoting the work, and having a healthy mindset when assessing the impact of your work. And I'll wrap up this lecture with episode 80, which will coincide with the release of The Boy and Bus 13, where I'll reflect on these stages of the creative process to this specific work. As always, the views expressed in this podcast are mine. What works for me isn't likely to work for you exactly the same way. The usefulness of these various pieces of advice will depend on your project, experience, tools, and more that I'll get into. The goal of this series is to share my frameworks, mindsets, strategies, and experiences that have led me to this point of my creative journey. This is an ever evolving process, as it should be for everyone. Now, why not start this series off with a quote from a creative master, Jerry Seinfeld? All this hand-wringing, worry, and concern over how are people viewing me, someone said something bad about me and you get so upset about it, is wasted time and energy. Your only focus should be on getting better at what you're doing. Focus on what you are doing. Get better at what you are doing. Everything else is a waste of time. And with that, have a great day. If you feel that Chris dealt with it, I'd appreciate your support of the show by sharing it with someone who might benefit. Ratings on your favorite podcast player are also helpful in growing the audience. Visit chriskreuter.com for free downloadable PDFs with notes and resources from today's episode, sign up for the CDWI mailing list, or to send in your problems or requests for future shows. That's CHRISKREUTER.com, or use the link in the show notes.